Europe lied to you about CBDCs, and they're not the only ones. In fact, Europe has more privacy advocates speaking out against CBDCs and speaking out to ensure your privacy than other places in the Western world. And yet the powers that be are still trying to silence them. I'm going to tell you what's happening right now and how you can protect yourself. One of the most interesting things over the last decade that I've been running Nomad Capitalist is watching people slowly realize, hey, we thought our Western country was the best in the world, and we're realizing more and more just how much the government lies to us, just how much we don't have the freedom that we think we do. And I think the next logical step that is realizing there are places in the world where we actually do have more of the things that we always thought we had here. That's what Nomad Capitalist talks about. But when I came across an article on Finbold that says the ECB, the European Central Bank chief, says the digital euro will not be entirely anonymous, I wanted to share this with you because there is some mistruth here. Here's the article. Earlier this year, the European Commission made a significant stride by proposing a comprehensive legal framework to usher in a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, within the Eurozone's 20 member states. The ECB had previously outlined plans for the digital euro, which could potentially debut by 2027, offering consumers the ability to transact with so-called public money seamlessly, both online and offline. In a most recent update, ECB President Christine Lagarde provided further insights into the bloc CBDC efforts, most notably the security and anonymity of the digital asset. Now, I would still argue that coming from the United States, there'll be more people fighting for privacy on any issue in many parts of Europe than you would have in the US or Canada or Australia. There are still countries in Europe that believe in privacy, and there are people speaking up for it. But that doesn't mean that the people at the top aren't going to lie to you and say, hey, you can use this anonymously. Now, the headline in this article says EU Parliament members have CBDC privacy concerns, and that's where this issue comes into play. Earlier in the week, Christine Lagarde, who, by the way, let's just step back for a second. This is actually the same Christine Lagarde that was found guilty of negligence in approving a massive payout of taxpayers' money to a controversial French businessman. And yet, when the French court convicted her, they actually said, well, you know what, let's not give her a criminal record, let's not make her go to jail. Back then, she was with the IMF, and she basically got to fail upward to the ECB. She's worked in national government, she's worked at the IMF, now she works for Europe's central bank, despite doing stuff that you or I would get in serious trouble for doing. So that aside, Lagarde fiercely defended the European Central Bank CBDC project, saying the currency, quote unquote, will not be completely anonymous, as is the case with a banknote. Now, if you look at countries, particularly in the Germanic-speaking world, Germans, for example, were the ones who really wanted to make sure when the Eurozone came in, like, we want to be able to have our cash. We like storing big amounts of cash. We want our large Deutschmark banknotes, and now we want our large Euro banknotes. And they were some of the stalwart defenders of the 500 Euro banknote that, of course, the people at the top said, well, we have to stop terrorism. We've got to stop criminals. They're not doing other things to stop those things. They're not doing other things to stop criminals, but they're taking big banknotes out of circulation to impact your ability to store cash. But here was the full quote. We are working to protect privacy. So we start off with kind of this canard, but then the truth. But since digital money leaves a trace in the blockchain, it will not be completely anonymous, as is the case with a banknote. Lagarde's remarks came after some members of European Parliament, the MEPs, voiced their concerns about the CBDC project, particularly its impact on user privacy. One MEP from Germany, Gunnar Beck, said, "Do you make a difference between anonymity and private life? How can we guarantee private life without guaranteeing anonymity?" You'll see that Austria, for example, you used to be able to rent a private safe deposit box there. You could just go and anonymously rent a box, put your gold bars, put whatever you want. You had to buy your own insurance over a small amount. You took responsibility for what was in there, but you had anonymity. That went away not so long ago, and now you can't do that anymore. And so the countries like Germany and like Austria that have stood up and said, hey, we want our privacy. We want, as this MEP said, our private life, are being pushed down by people who've been convicted of some pretty bad stuff. Now, commercial banks will have access to user data, but not the ECB. Now, we know historically that it's just a matter of time, whether that's built in from the beginning or whether over time things get worse. That's the promise they make now. And we've talked before about what the UK initially promised with their digital pound, what they called Britcoin. And later came to fruition that, yeah, some of what they were saying was kind of weaselly and wasn't really true. In response to all this, Lagarde said the ECB will not see how people will spend their digital cash. However, commercial banks will have access to the data, and who knows what happens. By the way, those commercial banks could always be told, just, hey, hand over the data to us. That's what Christine Lagarde admitted, because the system will use them as intermediaries to disseminate the digital euro. These banks will analyze the data and then share it with the CBDC users. What could possibly go wrong? Offering the anonymity banknotes provide is contrary to the objective of battling money laundering and terrorism financing, it says. But nevertheless, the ECB will not have access to CBDC data, and there will be no ECB Big Brother that will examine transaction details. Now, where have we heard this before? Maybe some of the people in charge have naively good intentions. I don't know how many of those people that there are. But this seems to me to be a slippery slope. And I'm certainly not on the far fringe of people combating CBDCs, but it's pretty easy to see that when you're putting this kind of information out there, it's only a matter of time before some bad stuff starts to happen. And what have we talked about? You have cultures in the Western world that are asking for more and more free stuff. Just go on social media. People are now complaining rent is against the natural human order. Things that even 25 years ago were just like, hey, we pay rent. Now it's like, why is nobody paying my rent? Why do landlords exist? We need to cancel landlords. We need to cancel private investment. We need to cancel everything so that it can just be given to people for free. And how do you do that? You'll raise taxes on wealthy people, but what you'll also do is you'll start going in, and even people on the right in countries like the US are doing this now, you'll start to say, hey, you don't get that pension we promised you. Yeah, we took your money for it, but we're not giving that pension. Now, you may not mind not getting $2,000 a month 30 years from now, but what other things aren't they going to give you? What happens when the government takes over your health care? What happens when the government takes over any number of other things, and then they have the ability to ration it? Oh, you know what? We told the banks to hand over all the details, but only on people who are drinking too much at pubs and shopping too much at wine stores. It's just for your safety. It's for the children. It's for your health. How dare you? And we've just seen in recent years how when they say it's for your health, a lot of people are going to agree. That's the Western world that you live in. Now, when I've spent a lot of time in parts of Latin America, Eastern Europe, and perhaps to a lesser extent in Asia, people are like, yeah, we're not going to go along with that because they've seen just how corrupt and how heavy-handed the government can be. They are under no illusions that their government is looking out for them, and they're under no illusions that their country is so spectacular. That's a culture that I think is one that you're going to want to have if you want to make sure the government's not allowed to lie to you. Because right now in the Western world, countries like Canada, as many as 7 out of 10 people say, yeah, we want socialism. They're not willing to pay for it. They're willing to pay $10 or $20 or $50 a month more in taxes. They want you to pay for it. They want you to suffer. And that majority will be weaponized against people who just want to be free, people who just want to build their business in peace. It's a bad time. I do think the EU offers an optionality that may be better than the US. At least there's many different countries. If you're an EU passport holder, you can live in, and you can certainly keep your funds somewhere else. This is the diversification that we talk about. You have bank accounts, you have safe deposit boxes outside of the banking system. You have maybe your crypto stored in a hard wallet somewhere. You have properties around the world. This is an opportunity for all of us to say, wherever we live, we can't just trust one government. What Nomad Capitalist does is helps people figure out how to get a couple of different residents, a couple of different passports. If you want to move some money outside of a place like the EU or the US or anywhere you think that, hey, I don't trust what these politicians are saying, then what we've talked about is have a couple of residence permits, and you can get those often by buying a property. Go to a country in Latin America, a number of them, from Uruguay to Ecuador to Panama to Nicaragua to Costa Rica, allow you to buy a property, park your money there, park it in their more favorable conditions. Perhaps the country's more tax-friendly if you live there. But until then, you've just got some money somewhere else that's outside of this system, and it's not under the aegis of Christine Lagarde. It's somewhere else. And maybe that country's not perfect either, but you know what? I bet they do a better job of knowing where their bread is buttered. One of the things that Edward Snowden talked about when I was watching a recent video is the super states are the ones who want to hold on to power. They're the ones who do stuff like this. They may have to kind of put the dog's pill, in a piece of bacon wrapped around it to get the dog to take the pill. That's what they may have to do, at least to start, to get you to say, all right, fine, bring in the CBDCs. But once that's in, they're not going to stop. But what he also said is smaller countries, which we've talked about for years, are going to see opportunity in adopting things that actually benefit the end user and adopting and promoting cryptocurrencies, for example. You want to be in a small country rather than a super state. And if you can't make that move, you're not ready to make that move now, you at least want to start putting your money somewhere. I'll tell you what, I think the Nicaraguan government is a lot worried about taking your $200,000 condo that you own just because you're a foreigner, because they want foreign investment. I think they've kind of transitioned in parts of the world like that to realizing we need cash. Whereas a super state like the EU is not really going to do that. They're going to push down harder. Now, I think there are some good countries. I spent some time in Ireland. I mean, Switzerland's not in the EU. There's some potential there. You see countries like Slovakia, which are pushing back on some of this stuff. You see countries like Italy, which are saying, hey, we've got a population problem. We need to bring in taxpayers. Let's give people tax incentives. Those countries may offer individual incentives. And quite frankly, everyone I've talked to at a very high level says, we think it's worth having an EU component, but we don't want to put all our money there. So we'd like to have a residence. We'd like to have a citizenship if we can. We'd like to have access to all these different EU countries to live, to have the opportunity. Let's see what happens. Maybe some of these countries will demand some sanity. But as a superstate overall, you want to have some money somewhere else. So if you're in the EU now, how can you diversify your cash out of the region? Where can you buy property? Where can you open bank accounts? Where can you open brokerage accounts and invest to where you have some money outside of that system? And if you want to diversify into the EU because, hey, maybe the US or Australia is going to be even worse on some of these things, then maybe you have a residence or citizenship in a European Union country. They're not going to really, outside of the United States, I don't think, say, because you're a citizen, you have to use our money. You can be an EU citizen and live somewhere else, but at least you'll have more freedom to go places. And I would argue if you're a citizen of Slovakia, when the fur starts flying, that's going to attract a heck of a lot less attention than being a citizen of the United States, which everyone associates with the ones starting the fur flying. The fact is, governments around the world are lying to you. They're saying you can keep your anonymity, but we've seen from people like Edward Snowden and many others, whether you like him or not, how little your anonymity means to them. And so diversifying your money is really more important than ever. People say, when this happens, you're going to have nowhere to go. Well, then maybe you should go somewhere before it happens. And if not you, at least your money. It doesn't have to be banking. Again, it could be real estate. But when you put money somewhere else, it often entitles you to residence, and it kind of becomes a complete solution. Nomad Capitalist creates holistic solutions where you do one thing, but you get another. If you're trying to avoid CBDCs, you don't just want a bank account somewhere. You want a complete plan of how all the little pieces work together that solves the unknown unknowns. That's how you protect your privacy in a CBDC world.